On the evening of December 3rd, 2024, South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol made a shocking announcement, a declaration of martial law. The news stunned not only the people of South Korea, but the entire world.
비상계엄을 선포한다.
Martial law.
A short 6 hours later, the National Assembly overturned the martial law order. But those 6 hours were enough to grab the attention of the world. The international media quickly labeled this sudden and unexpected political move as authoritarian, anti-democratic, and described it as threatening the country's democracy. The term martial law, which had been nearly forgotten in democratic countries, was suddenly back in the public consciousness, especially here. The people of Taiwan are all too familiar with martial law. In fact, Taiwan holds a world record since it was ruled under martial law for an incredible 38 years, ranking among the longest periods of martial law in history. And here's the thing, it wasn't even that long ago.
戒严的时间有38年的时间，那到现在其实是37年，所以我们的解严时间比戒严的时间还短。
Nowadays, people generally don't associate Taiwan with the words martial law, authoritarianism, or undemocratic. In fact, in The Economist's 2023 Democracy Index, Taiwan ranked #1 in Asia and #10 globally. It's right up there with major democratic nations in the West. Yet, just 40 years ago, this same place was under the rule of the world's second longest martial law regime, an era defined by extreme oppression and brutality. Things were so bad that, at times, China kind of looked more democratic than Taiwan. China? That China? So what happened in Taiwan? How did it transform from a record-holding dictatorship to Asia's model democracy in just 30 years? And why was it Taiwan, not China, that moved toward democracy? What does it really take for a nation to go on that road?
Well, I can't go back to China after COVID because of political danger. My name is Wang Hao. I'm actually retired now, but do some part-time work for weekly television program to discuss relations between Taiwan, China, and the US. In the middle 1980s, I went to Peking University for my first degree as a law student. It was a period that relative liberalism in Chinese university camps.
In the 1980s, when people talked about China, there was an unexpected issue on the table: democracy. It was literally the writing on the wall. The democracy wall. This wall first popped up in 1978, right outside Beijing's Xidan Sports Stadium. People covered it with posters, sharing their thoughts, speaking their minds. Some were talking about democracy. Others were calling out police brutality and alleged torture. And some were looking back, questioning the past. What exactly were they reflecting on?
What actually happened in China in the last 10 years and how we prevent the Cultural Revolution ever happen again?
In the 1960s, Chinese leader Mao Zedong launched what he claimed were transformative reforms for China, the Cultural Revolution.
The sign says, "We are determined to liberate Taiwan."
But the result? It was disastrous.
Misery and hunger are everywhere. People eat grass because grass is all that they have to eat.
And so it was the darkest period of Chinese history.
Many intellectuals were publicly persecuted. Famine and uprisings broke out across the country, leading to the deaths of tens of millions. It wasn't until Mao's death in 1976 that these movements finally came to an end. So when Deng Xiaoping came to power in 1978 and announced the policy of reform and opening up, things looked like they were going to change. China opened up to the world, visiting world leaders, gifting pandas as diplomatic gestures. At the same time, foreign businesses entered China, and everyday people got their first taste of Western culture. Even foreign rock bands took the stage in China, singing about freedom and rebellion. So when the Democracy Wall appeared in Xidan, what did the top leader Deng Xiaoping have to say? We have no right to deny the masses their expression of democracy or their right to post big character posters. If the people are upset, let them vent their anger. There's nothing to fear. The people of China went from gathering around the Democracy Wall to marching through Tiananmen Square, celebrating Deng Xiaoping's supportive words. Everything seemed to be on the right path. What about Taiwan?
大概就是威权统治最严厉有效的时期。我是陈翠莲，我现在是台湾大学历史学系的教授。我曾经在1987年硕士班毕业之后，我大概有5年的时间在当记者，所以我大概到高中其实是一个十足的党国青年。那我觉得那个国民党政府非常伟大。
In 1949, after losing the Chinese Civil War, the Kuomintang or KMT retreated to Taiwan, where the Jiang family ruled with an iron fist for nearly 40 years. Jiang Jieshi held power for 27 years, and his son Jiang Jingguo for 10 more. On the surface, Taiwan seemed to be thriving, a booming GDP, a spot among the 4 Asian tigers, and strong ties with the democratic world.
成为近代中国经济史上的一个奇迹。
But for the Taiwanese people, the era was filled with countless tales of terror and oppression.
那一直到林宅血案发生那个冲击很大林义雄他原本是一个很成功的律师，赚了很多钱，所以之后他就开始参政，那他变成党外的候选人，那他当选省议员。那这个人就是个性很刚强，对政府的质询措辞非常激烈尖锐，对当局来讲他是眼中钉。
On February 28, 1980, while Lin Yixiong was imprisoned for political reasons, an unknown attacker broke into his home. His mother and his 7-year-old twin daughters were brutally murdered. The attack happened on February 28th, the anniversary of Taiwan's anti-government uprising, the 228 incident of 1947. Many believe the attack was meant as a warning to pro-democracy activists, those who oppose the authoritarian government. And to this day, the killer has never been found.
所以那时候非常震撼整个社会也震惊，台湾的政治对抗到这样的程度
And this wasn't just an isolated incident. Around the same period, the government violently suppressed opposition during the Kaohsiung incident. Not long after, a Taiwanese-American scholar, Dr. Chen Wenchen, who had criticized the regime, was mysteriously murdered. In an even more shocking turn, Taiwan intelligence agencies went so far as to hire gangsters to travel to the United States to assassinate Henry Liu, a writer who had published criticisms of Jiang Jingguo. Let's not forget, this was all happening right after this.
A joint communique on the establishment of diplomatic relations between the United States of America and the People's Republic of China, January 1st, 1979.
Things are not looking good for Taiwan.
The KMT has a great problem in terms of its international legitimacy as well as domestic political legitimacy.
邓小平在改革开放的时候，蒋经国总统正在进行岛内的独裁威权、极度的镇压，两种形象的对比，在当时国际上对台湾来说其实是相当不利的。
Just when it seemed like things had hit rock bottom, Taiwan's leader Jiang Jingguo made a surprising move. In an interview with Time magazine, he explicitly stated that the Jiang family could not and would not run for the next leadership position, effectively relinquishing the family's grip on power. But why? Why would a dictator willingly give up power? To understand this, we have to look at the global landscape of the 1980s. East Asia was experiencing what came to be known as the third wave of democratization. The United States actively promotes democracy around the world.
1970年代末期，卡特总统执政的时候，他强力去推动人权的政策。雷根总统呢，他推得更前面就是希望他的友邦民主化。第3波民主化的过程，美国扮演了一定的角色。蒋经国会越来越感受到压力。
In February 1986, the Philippines experienced the People Power Revolution, overthrowing Ferdinand Marcos, who had ruled for over 20 years.
菲律宾总统马可仕被人民推翻下台了，台湾社会非常兴奋好多记者啊、政治人物他们到菲律宾观摩台湾可以怎样学习这样子的人民力量。
And the following year, after a series of assassinations and violent crackdowns, South Korea saw the eruption of the June Democratic Uprising, setting the nation on a path to democracy. One by one, authoritarian regimes in Asia were collapsing. And these events placed enormous pressure on Jiang Jingguo. How do we know? Because he wrote about it in his diary.
台湾社会对于蒋经国的印象会认为他是亲民爱民的领袖，是一个最伟大的领导者他带领了民主转型。蒋经国日记在最近几年开放了，美国政府的档案开放之后你会发现事实情况并不是这样，因为日记里面所呈现的蒋经国完全对民主没有概念，他不喜欢民主，所以蒋经国会越来越承受美国要求他自由化、民主化的压力。
Everything we've discussed was beginning to weigh heavily on him. The desire for freedom among the Taiwanese people had become undeniable. In 1987, Taiwan officially ended 38 years of martial law. Meanwhile, across the strait, the Chinese Communist Party seemed to be making significant progress during its reform and opening up era. China's economy was growing rapidly, and many high-profile foreign dignitaries were visiting the country. In 1986, waves of students took to the streets demanding further reforms and even the right to vote. But then, Deng Xiaoping made a choice. He cracked down on party liberals, forcing Hu Yaobang, the figurehead of reform, to step down.
A lot of Chinese people think that Hu Yaobang was a good guy and he was purged or treated unfairly by the old guards of the Communist Party, which actually against a further deeper reform. So when he suddenly died because of a heart attack, there was a massive condolence memorial service voluntarily by the students and the citizens of Beijing.
那台湾刚刚解严中国大陆又发生那个学生群众运动，所以台湾社会其实很期待中国在这个机会里面可以变成民主化，所以很关心这个过程。
I was a student in Oxford. At the time, there were about 4,000 Chinese students studying in UK. We started to gather together in front of the Chinese embassy. So I actually went several times from Oxford to London to join the student protest in front of the Chinese embassy in London, and gradually attract more and more English students to participate as well. But in the morning of June the 4th, the military opened the fire and the tanks smashed all the resistance and entered into the city center of Beijing.
Thousands of protesters were killed, most of them ordinary residents of Beijing and bystanders. Any attempt at resistance was quickly crushed. This was the Tiananmen Square massacre that happened on June 4th, 1989. Putting the numbers 6 and 4 together has been banned in China since that day. As we now know, these two countries eventually went on different paths. When we think about democracy, we usually tie it to certain people or events. But looking back at history, it's clear that a country's move toward democracy isn't just a simple game plan. It's a massive, unpredictable undertaking, one that sometimes might come down to a roll of the dice.
台湾能够转型，说起来其实是非常幸运的。事实上就有3个重要的条件配合，一个就是人民持续不断的努力推动，一个是80年代有利的国际结构，那另外一个就是我们很幸运在这个历史的关键时刻上台的人是对民主信念 有一些深刻认识的人。
In 1988, Jiang Jingguo passed away and Vice President Li Denghui assumed the presidency. Many believed he held little real power and was merely a transitional president. But under his leadership, along with the efforts of many others, Taiwan peacefully completed what is now known as the Quiet Revolution, paving its way toward democracy.
他竟然用了很巧妙的一些手腕，依照他心中的蓝图，把台湾一步一步推向人权的恢复，还有民主体制的建立。
Meanwhile, across the strait, after a fleeting moment of hope, the Chinese Communist Party took a different course.
The international world was misled by the Chinese Communist Party in believing that if we supported the economy of China, eventually there would be liberalization in China. But after 40 years of trying that theory, it actually failed.
So, we have to ask, what is democracy really? Is it the electoral system, freedom of speech, or multiple political parties? Democracy isn't perfect. It's not something that once gained can never be lost. In fact, it's often a challenge to maintain. It's a challenging path.
大部分的人可能对民主价值、信念转型的过程，事实上都没有足够的认识。好，所以这是我们现在面临非常重大的问题。
The journey toward democracy is full of obstacles, but along the way, there are also beautiful moments.
Taiwan is a very free society. For example, we have same-sex marriage, and everybody has the right to vote, to elect or be elected freely. Highly value human rights, that both the government as well as the ordinary people respect various aspects of the human rights.
On September 10th, 2025, Taiwan will reach a remarkable milestone. For the first time, the length of its post-martial law period will exceed its martial law period, 38 years and 56 days. What a long and precious stretch of time. The people of Taiwan hold on to the belief that martial law should remain a thing of the past, forever confined to the pages of history. Since Taiwan's first direct presidential election in 1996, citizens have had the opportunity to choose their own leader every 4 years. By 2024, Taiwan will have held 8 presidential elections and experienced 3 peaceful transfers of power between political parties. For Taiwanese people, democracy and freedom are now just a part of daily life. But looking back on those tough times isn't just about remembering. It's about learning, growing, and making sure the shadow of authoritarian rule never comes back. It's important for us to reflect on this journey so we can control our destiny and become a stronger, more resilient democracy.
Do you like the life in Taiwan right now?
Yes, of course. Life in Taiwan is very convenient for older people like us.
认识自己社会转变的动力、努力的过程，如何获得这样不容易的成就，我觉得对台湾社会来说非常重要。等于是我们对自己重新定位。历史认识的目的不是为了知道过去，它是为了定位我们现在，我们有什么问题或是不足，然后目标是为了改善或追求更好的未来，这样子的一个情形。